guys. Today's video is actually going to be a little bit different because I want to talk about something quite personal and important to me. I want to talk about how I found faith while studying at St Andrews, how I found Christ, how this has changed my life, and also how I gave myself to him exactly a year ago. Now, of course, this type of video isn't going to appeal to everyone, and I want to say first off that I'm not trying to convert anybody either. I just wanted to be honest and transparent because until now, though my faith and practicing of it with church and such has been present in these videos, it has been rather sidelined. And you know, even if you're not a Christian and you're watching this, then I really recommend that you just keep watching because hopefully it'll just give you a better insight into me and also how amazing and loving the people of St Andrews can be. I am really blessed to have them. And so I would really just encourage you, whether you agree or disagree or are encouraged or discouraged by anything that I say now, to just drop me a line. This is a story wrapped up in St Andrews and the people who I'm lucky enough to call my friends here. It's about how God really pursued me and the really transformative power that Christ has had and continues to have in my life. Firstly, I want to say that I have put off telling this story so many times out of fear for it not being perfect or doing it with the wrong intentions, to glorify myself for instance and not honour God. However, I think I finally realised that no testimony can ever be perfect and that this is actually the beauty of it because I didn't come to God perfect or finished. If anything, that's why I needed him. Also, a testimony can never be perfect because it's never going to be complete. Even once you have found God and given yourself to Christ, the work continues, and if anything, it gets harder. You see pain and suffering much more acutely. You have to manage your own life as well as make sure you're never static in your faith. In truth, this past year of knowing God for me has been exhausting, but these difficulties in no way mean I would ever give up on my faith now. In no way am I the best example of a Christian or even the best representative for Christians in St Andrews. However, I truly believe that this story shows how the Lord was working in my life so actively and passionately that it's an important story to tell now. I did not grow up in a Christian home really. I was baptised as a baby, as all middle-class English people seem to be, but we never really attended church or spoke about faith. God was not a presence in my life. Indeed, I never even thought about him. Nevertheless, as I grew older and became more of a product of the English private school system, Christianity and God naturally took more of a presence. We'd have chapel almost every morning with hymns and a service and a reading by the chaplain, but I still didn't really engage. That is not to say I was an atheist. I probably wasn't even agnostic. I just avoided. In conversation, I'd label myself a Christian out of tradition, but in truth, I wasn't a Christian. I didn't attend church. I sinned regularly, but most importantly, I had no relationship with God. I would sing the hymns, passively listen to the chaplain, and then get on with my day. I was a tea and cake Christian, finding my identity in tradition, academics, and competition. God was nowhere. My aim for the majority of school had been academic success, culminating in me attending a prestigious university. And so, in September 2018, with my A-levels secured, I headed to St Andrews to start my life's next stage. I'd expected it all to be pretty ordinary, but it really wasn't. It was here that God really started to pursue me passionately. I started university, expecting to live the classic uni lifestyle. I had freedom for one of the first times, and just enjoy myself without any concern for my parents or for myself. St Andrews made me feel safe, but in truth I wasn't really satisfied. Years of waiting and expectation for university deflated. Now that I was here, I had no clue where to put my focus or even find my identity. But still, I passively carried on the facade of enjoying university culture. However, now only in looking back, do I realise that God had so many different plans for me. It is amazing in how many places God has actually put Christians in my life. In Freshers Week, I met the wonderful Catherine who lived opposite. Not only was she the first Northern Irish person I have ever met, but she was also a very energetic Christian. Later, I was introduced to her friend Peter, and then, a few weeks later, hoping to make more friends, I signed up for a theatre production where I met Rachel. All three were Christians, all three friends, and it is from here that God began to take more of a role in my friendships. Catherine and I would meet weekly for walks and chats to see how we were getting on, and slowly talks about faith would become more common. Still though, I didn't know God. I still didn't think about him actively. I was still sinning, and my classic uni lad lifestyle continued. I went along to a carol service that Christmas, and each Friday night to Toasty Bar, a Christian Union-run hub for a place of safety and food for drunk students, but still nothing. It wasn't until my second term in St Andrews that I began to return God's pursuit for me. I returned in January 2019, only to now find that with the initial shock of university being over, I was deeply dissatisfied. Of course I had friends, friendships I still cherish, but in truth something was missing. I would go to a social event and then come back to my room and feel lonely. I would drink on a Friday night and then wake up the next morning and just feel discontented. My life, though seemingly fun, had become shallow. Each week at Toasty Bar, Peter and I would talk, and I would finally crack and tell him how all of this had made me feel so low. Meanwhile, Catherine and I, and sometimes Rachel too, would continue our Christian conversations, and soon a jealousy arose. Their lives had a clear meaning, they had focus, and though of course they struggled with things as everyone does, they had a visible comfort and confidence about them. I was shocked by how much they had each other. Watching lots of Christians one Friday night praying for all the students who had come to Toasty Bar, I realised that they didn't just have friendships or love for each other. Something deeper connected them. It was Jesus. I continued to go to parties, but still God didn't give up. In my Greek class, he placed Michael and Thea, two of the kindest and best intentioned people I know. I met Emily, who, each night after our late library sessions, would talk to me for hours about her faith. She even invited me to church repeatedly. I was just always too scared to accept. Everywhere I looked, there was a Christian presence. God was showing his love to me through blessing me with these amazing friendships. Relationships which were not shallow, but based on genuine care and my increasing interest in Christianity. Naturally, I still had all the classic questions about suffering, many of which would be directed to Peter at 3 a.m. It was only when I realised that Christians suffer too, but they continue to love God, and when Peter told me that there was no such thing as a perfect Christian, that I began to see the humanity and openness of God. Catherine and I began reading Mark's Gospel, and slowly things began to fall into place. The transformative power of Christ was slowly becoming more obvious to me. Still though, something kept me back, and in truth, it was my cowardice. I am the biggest coward. I was scared of giving myself fully to God, scared to be vulnerable. I was scared to commit. Conversations with Catherine would both delight her, as my basic understanding increased, but also frustrate her, as I still wasn't making a leap or letting God fully in. Then spring break came, and Catherine had to leave because of a family emergency. But still, God didn't give up. He brought Rachel back for a 5-hour coffee in which God was at the centre of the entire conversation. Peter remained steadfast, and as always was ready to chat. But still, my focus was on Catherine. She was hurting, and in St Andrews I felt helpless. And so, after trying before and failing, feeling stupid and unable to get over the mental block, I turned to prayer. She was the first person I ever prayed for. It wasn't natural or easy. I had no real idea what I was doing. Yet I felt a force compelling me to pray and almost trust that God would help her. Thus came Easter 2019. After visiting Toasty Bar on Good Friday, where by then I seemingly knew every Christian, I found myself increasingly wanting to spend more time in their company. On Saturday, I spent the morning alone, outside in St Andrew's sun, reading the rest of Mark's Gospel that Catherine and I had never got the chance to finish. And then, by Easter Sunday, God brought all of the elements together. Emily took me to a sunrise service and then a church breakfast. Sarah and Sam took me to Free Church for an Easter service where Peter and Thea were, and then I went to a baptism where Rachel was. In a single morning, God had surrounded me with his people and love. Indeed, it was becoming increasingly clear that God was providing for me. On Easter Monday, the Christian Union put on a theatre production of Mark's Gospel, which I was going to review for the university newspaper. You can find a link to the review, the production, the Gospel, St Andrew's Christian Union, and also some of the St Andrew's churches available, and everything else I've mentioned in the description box below. But at this production, seeing the Gospel come alive, seeing how people were moved, and realising how I was affected, it just all seemed to click. We never really know the hour we first believe, and though it would be another week until I told Catherine or Peter or anyone, it was in that moment, as I heard the actor's rendition of Christ's cries on the cross, that a profound change seemed to happen. Only then, in seeing the ultimate act of God's love, the sacrifice of his Son for all of us, past, present, and future, did I realise who God was. His pursuit had been incredible. It was exhausting, but it was also full of so much joy. Only from then on did I find my identity in God. Only from then on was I a Christian. Now, of course, so much more has happened since then. So much growth and change has taken place. Because you see, when you give yourself to God, your outlook changes, your lifestyle changes, and most importantly, your joy changes. No longer is my happiness fleeting or shallow. For though being a Christian is hard, I now know I can always lean back on the comfort and knowledge of God's long-standing love. For many people, this love may seem abstract, and that is completely understandable, but when you really search for it, and I recommend that you all do, you really realise it is a physical love. Firstly, I'll never forget my friends' faces when I told them I was a Christian. They were happier than I think I was, because they were full of the knowledge of what God's love was going to do for me. And secondly, I want to quote a verse from Amazing Grace to show God's love. Don't worry, I'm not going to sing it. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound, that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found, was blind, but now I see. This verse epitomises a lot of people's testimonies, but for me the relevance is even more precious precious. I really was lost by the time I started university. I had no idea what I was doing, but in experiencing God and experiencing his love, I am secure, I am found. In God I have found peace and comfort because of his everlasting love for me. It is a genuine feeling that I had never felt before, and it cannot be replicated by anything else. And so, this is the story of how I found faith whilst in St Andrews. God's timing and execution, as I've said, was impeccable, and the friends he has surrounded me with here, I feel immensely blessed to have. There are many more people than those who I have mentioned who have helped me and continue to help me. From Sky to Jack to Rohan to Anna to Ailey to Dan to Chris, an endless count of people who prayed for my salvation. God was working through all of these people, and indeed that is a piece of advice I have for everyone. If you really want to see the work and love of God, don't just look to the beauty of nature, whether that be the waves of the sea or leaves in the breeze, but look around you. Look to your friends and your family, because the love that they have for you is installed in them through God. I do not doubt that God would have pursued me wherever I went to university, but I feel immensely blessed to have experienced a journey to Christ with the people, my friends, who God has used and loves.